My name is Phil Perazio, and I'm a urologic oncologist, a surgeon. Like many of you, I absolutely love what I do, and I would not choose another profession. But I have struggled with professional identity, practice efficiency, and wellness over the years. Operate with Zen is a podcast designed to explore a mindful approach to surgery and to being a surgeon. By discussing these struggles and mindful solutions, I hope together we can create a community of strong and healthy surgeons. Enjoy. Welcome to this episode of Operate with Zen. Today, I have the great pleasure of being joined by Dr. David Keynes. David, introduce yourself to the audience.
I'm David Keynes. I'm a urologist right now in the greater Boston area. And there's a long story and a short story. But essentially, I was born in South Africa, and I've been moving around a lot my whole life. Moved to Canada, moved to New York, and then eventually settled in the Boston area.
Wonderful. And interesting fun fact, David and I, without knowing it, grew up probably about half a mile from each other. Definitely rode our bikes by each other's houses growing up without knowing it. And if anybody else is from Southern Westchester, you know, half a mile apart, totally different school district and towns, and very different, but not too far from each other. So it's always a small world.
It is crazy. It is crazy. I mean, stones throw away from each other.
Yeah. So you've been on an interesting journey the last couple of years. I've been on an interesting journey the last couple of years. And so kind of today, our theme and what we wanted to talk about a little bit was passion projects. And you've been on a little bit of a passion project of late. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit of the story about Well Prepped, which is the name of the project, but where it kind of came from, where it started, and you know, how you got started on a passion project and how other people out there are thinking about these things. We'll try to help them walk through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's just say in general about passion projects that I personally think that it's hugely important for people to have passion projects outside of urology. I mean, do you agree with that?
I do. And my thinking on that has changed dramatically in the last couple of years, to be honest with you. But we'll get there. You tell your story and then I'll chime
Yeah.
in.
So, I mean, just to kick it off with my mindset, one of my most influential mentors is Dr. Robert Roth, who is retired, but lives still in the Boston area. He told me as a resident, and this stuck with me: don't let urology be the thing in life that you're most proud of. He told me that 20 years ago, and I think about it a lot. Just when you say passion projects, that's where my mind goes. And before I landed on Well Prep, there's always been some kind of passion project going on in my life. I mean, obviously family is first, but I tend to dive deeply into things almost in a manic way. I love playing guitar. I deeply dive into that. I consider that a passion. I became embroiled in learning personal finance, and that became a passion project, and spreading that around. And I never realized until I did that the satisfaction that I get from helping other doctors. I mean, people comment on that when they bump into me at the AUA, and it's hugely satisfying. So I know this is a kind of a circuitous answer to your question, but Well Prepped is just to give the bird's eye view, it's a productivity tool that lets doctors send educational information to their patients so that they can arrive prepared. It didn't come to me like a flash light bulb, or like, I hit my head and I thought of this idea. That's not what happened. And I actually suspect most things in life don't happen that way. I do think you have to be primed to be looking for problems if you're interested in doing that. But and that I was definitely the case. But So I can tell you the different pieces that came together. The first was that I struggled at around 2015, 2016. I really struggled with um, the efficiency of my practice, feeling disconnected from my practice. I don't know if I was truly burnt out, but it felt that way. It's all on a spectrum anyway. Um, but I remember giving this Gleason Gleason talk to a 68-year-old guy, engineer. I can remember it vividly. I'm giving this talk, and I arrived at the end of the talk, and I didn't remember giving it. When you drive to work and you're like, all of a sudden you're there, you've done your commute, and it's scary in a way. Um, for me, that's not how I want to feel. We've chosen a profession. And when you feel that way, at least for me, it's very upsetting. I'm sure you've had moments like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say in the positive and negative, I mean, there's days where, whether it's the prostate cancer talk or a kidney cancer talk, I'm talking to somebody about a small renal mass and active surveillance. I mean, I've said that spiel thousands of times and it just rolls off your tongue. And then there's times where you feel very disconnected. You feel,
Yeah.
to use a mindfulness term, a lack of presence, right? You're just not there. You're not with that patient. And that's not, like you said, that's not why we got into medicine. That's not why we became surgeons. We became them for that deep interaction, that deep connection with people.
Yes.
And there's nothing more. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying there's nothing more intimate than having that conversation and then operating on somebody, right? I mean, that's
why we signed up for this. That's why we signed up.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
even telling you this story, I feel a sense of guilt. Like if I'm telling you that I struggled saying this spiel, and if you step back, it can almost sound like, well, what's this doctor complaining about? Yeah, you've got to say things multiple times. Get over it. And I think a lot of doctors feel that way. It's almost taboo to talk about. But like I'm putting it out there now, where a lot of people are affected by it, and maybe it's not okay as professionals that we should have to always do this. So anyway, that was one piece of the puzzle. In June of 2016, I decided to do this experiment, and I took, there are these programs that will shorten long URLs, and I took the PDF for the NCCN Patient Guide for Prostate Cancer, put it on my Google Drive, and I made a short link, NCCN Guide for Patients, to make it easy for my administrative assistant. And that's the only reason I know the date that I did this, because I could look back and see when I shortened the link. But I went to her and I said, listen, if somebody's coming to see me for prostate cancer, can you email them this link? And she said, sure. And it started happening maybe 50% of the time. And those visits were like incrementally a little bit better. Then I did it within a month. I did it for kidney cancer. And I did one for ureteroscopy. I look back, that video that I did for ureteroscopy has had only 2 lifetime clicks. So I didn't get everything right, but it made an impact. And this was like a tiny change in my workflow, and it felt better. And patients were commenting on it. Hey, thanks for sending me that guide. I have some questions, and we went right to their questions. And so I recorded a video of me explaining robotic prostatectomy. And now I'm telling my secretary, hey, could you send them this link and this link? And she started to get a little bit annoyed. So that's 2 pieces of the puzzle. Now, around the same time, the hospital I'm working at has a wellness initiative, and they send an Epic expert to every doctor. It was great, actually, to help us with our dot phrases and our templates and our favorites, speed buttons, things like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, this is fantastic. But I was picturing like me the night before clinic. I'm somebody who likes to prep. I usually try to do it during the day and not at home, but I do like to prep for clinic. And I always have this picture in my mind, like I'm prepping for clinic and there's like 30 patients at home doing what? Doing nothing. And this occurred to me during this wellness initiative. Like, how can we involve the patients in this? That was a fleeting thought. Shortly after that, I did a nephrectomy on an 83-year-old woman, and I go to round on her on the day of discharge. And she's sitting there in bed, and she's got a piece of paper, and it's one of these over photocopied pieces of paper about Foley catheter care. And it's been photocopied so many times. There's a photo on it, but you can't see it. It's a black box. Okay. And she shows it to me and she goes, Dr. Keynes, I can't figure out what to do with my catheter. I can't even read this piece of paper. And I look down at the bed and she's got an iPhone 12 Max. She's 83. So I'm thinking, my God, like there's some kind of huge disconnect. And the thought occurs to me that, technology can mitigate this somehow. Now, if there was ever a light bulb moment in all this, are you familiar with the proliferation of this idea of a link in bio? So on Twitter, you can have a link in your bio, on Instagram, link in bio.
Sure.
So this whole industry has grown up around link in bio to help people turn that into a stack of resources. Things like Linktree and stuff like that. I don't know if you've come across that.
Yeah.
Very popular. So I saw that, and that was like a bit of a light bulb moment where I thought, because my secretary was again complaining, like, okay, I can't send like this for kidney cancer and that for prostate cancer. So I saw that and I thought, this is perfect, not for self-promotion, but for organizing resources, because it's so simple. It's like a page of buttons. And so those are the 4 or 5 pieces that came together where I thought this could work, but I wasn't thinking about starting something. I just was thinking about my own practice, So, scratching my own itch, sort of. So that was how it kicked off, and it was just a very simple thing. And so I got some of my friends and colleagues and to try this out, and I sort of approached people in my network saying, "Hey, listen, if I build you a page," I actually built it before I spoke to them, but I built you a page. Would you try it? And people really liked it. And the most gratifying part about this initial part of the story is I kind of expected people to say, "Yeah, that's interesting," or that's neat. That's a neat idea. But people are saying thank you. And I know it sounds cliche, but nearly all of us went into medicine because a patient said thank you. And when I was like in college and I was volunteering in an emergency room, like that was a moment where I was like, God, like what could be better than this? This job is amazing. Now, fast forward to this passion project, doctors saying thank you for this thing is like, I mean, it puts such a big smile on my face. I can't even tell you. So that's the long story of sort of how the pieces came together. But
yeah, I love it. And there's a lot to kind of unpack and get into there, but I want to go back to the beginning and talk a little bit. You said your mentor said, don't let urology be the thing you're most proud of. And just to give you a contrast, I trained at a place where it was the complete opposite message, right? I trained at Johns Hopkins and at the Brady Urological Institute, known for training leaders and academic leaders.
Yeah.
And we were brought in and we were trained with the expectation that urology was going to be one of the things that we were most proud of. Yeah. And I'm proud of a lot of things I have done in urology in my career to date. But I'll tell you what's given me tremendous perspective on those things, which took a while to learn, are all of the endeavors outside of the operating room and outside of those things. And, working on cancer and working with patients, those things are phenomenal. But even things as simple as, we were talking before, David, about playing basketball and being competitive with friends, gives you perspective on what you do on a daily basis. I feel like it makes me a better urologist at times. Yeah. Working on things like this, having conversations with you and other people in the Operate with Zen kind of realm, and working on wellness gives tremendous perspective on the other academic and other contributions we make in urology. So for people out there who weren't given the positive message that you were to get outside of the hospital and get outside of urology, I want to take a chance to give that message and say, you know, even if you are focused on urology and you want that to be your number one priority, and I would say if that is your number one priority, that's okay too,
It
right?
is, yeah.
Everybody's different and everybody's going to have a different value system. If that's your value, pursuing things outside of that space will make you a better urologist and make you a better doctor. So absolutely, pursue your passions outside of medicine.
Yeah. As you're talking, I was thinking if we change that quote a little bit, to say, don't make urology the only thing in life that you're proud of.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
fair
I mean
enough.
the way originally phrased, I think is probably a little bit dismissive, but yeah, don't make it the only thing. This
Yeah.
same urologist also said, just when you think, what you're doing in urology is really amazing, go to the local mall, tap a stranger on the shoulder, and say, "Who's the most famous urologist?" And you know what they're going to say? "What's a urologist?"
It's true. It's absolutely
No,
true.
but the idea is, put it into perspective. Another way to look at this with passion projects is, I think I can at least speak for myself, and I suspect there's other people like me. One of the things I love most about becoming a doctor was the learning. So much learning, and we all sat in front of books. We cracked them open. We sat there, sometimes for 20 hours straight, but loved it. And I think as you approach mid-career and maybe over the hump, you crave that steep learning curve again. And the way that you can get that back is, you can get it back in urology or whatever specialty you're in, and research quenches that fire for a lot of people. But having outside passions can also do that. I think we are as a breed addicted to learning.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal point. And it's not just medicine. It's not just doctors. There's I don't want to butcher the statistics, which I do often on this podcast, but there's a study of Nobel laureates. And if you looked at Nobel laureates compared to similarly successful scientists in their field by number of publications, kind of rank a position, the Nobel laureates had a ton more, we'll call them hobbies, right? They played piano, they painted, they
Oh,
read, they did all of these other things outside of their field. As you
wow.
said, kind of, I love how you said it engaged a learning curve or kind of cognitively challenged them outside of their field. It brought something else that made them, we talk about it as well-roundedness, right? Or that's kind of the traditional term, but there is really something about getting outside of what you do on a daily basis and bringing passion to that makes you really good at what you do on a daily basis too.
Yeah, and there's no question about it. There's no question about it. So just just to give you a sampling of some of the things that I've had to learn as I embarked on this, I mentioned it started as just a thing for me to help me, and then the idea wouldn't leave me alone, and then it grew from there. But things like, how to start a company, and web design, and to learn enough about computer coding so that I could interface with a team of developers, um, startup financing. I mean, there's a lot of, and I love it, but I think I love it because I love hopping onto a new learning curve where I don't know anything and digging in.
Yeah. And I think, not to correct me, I don't want to kind of project onto you, but I think a big part of this too is community.
Yeah.
And, there's I definitely talk about this on the podcast and other points too, but there's a guy named Stuart Friedman, who's actually a professor at Penn, and talks about breaking life domains into kind of your home, work, self, and community. And when I first started reading this, the community piece didn't make a lot of sense to me. I was like, well, where does community fit in, right? I can take care of myself and be really good at home with my wife and kids and get a lot done at work. And, community is the kind of thing we put off to the side. But especially over the last few years working in this wellness space now, the what you get back from building and working in community, and how it makes me a better father, it makes me a better husband, it makes me a better urologist, it makes me work better in all of these other domains by working in community. And so when you find a community that aligns with your passion, I think you're experiencing the same thing. Go after it. It gives you incredible energy and positive energy in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I hadn't framed it that way in my mind, but you're right. I mean, when I told you that people are approaching me, early access users of WellPrep saying thank you, that's what it is. It's community. It feels like it's starting. I don't want to overstate it because it's a tweak to people's workflow, but it feels like, all right, now I just want to try to help as many people as I can. I didn't start off like I'm going to help physician productivity and try to mitigate burnout. It really didn't. But it does feel that way now. I think one of the things that I've really taken away from your podcast is you make things like practicing gratitude and mindfulness very accessible, and in a way that you can work it into your daily life without it feeling so formal. But as I read the articles about burnout, at the very end, it says, but also systemic changes are needed at a system level. And I think there's a tendency for all of us, because doctors are so trusting. We're like such trusting people, to think like somebody must be working on this for us and they're going to help us, somebody. But who? I think we're in the best position. And I don't mean just me, but there are listeners out there something's going to spark an idea, maybe from this conversation. We're in the best position to solve our own problems, and we can do it just by trying, because no one's going to do it for us.
Exactly. I agree with you completely. And sometimes it can be these passion projects and these things. And I'll tell you, you'll probably comment the same. This is kind of found energy, and it's in found time, and it just brings you great joy to work on it. So it doesn't feel, so instead of sitting there and, scrolling on Twitter or looking for the thing I don't need on Amazon, you actually work on something you really enjoy doing, and you really enjoy the hour you just spent talking with someone about, for me, mindfulness, or you working on kind of this program. And I think people need to understand that too. There's a lot of wasted time we have in our day.
There's no question. And it's true that if you're working on something that it's probably a good litmus test. If you feel like it's work, it's not a passion project.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're trying to seek time to do this thing, whatever it is, and you've hit on something that you're passionate about.
No, and you do a great job of bringing up the systemic issues too in our field and kind of in our hospitals. And another way to do this is, it doesn't have to be an app. It doesn't have to be a podcast. Turnover could suck in your hospital, right? And guess what? You could complain about it all day, every day, but unless you stand up and do something about it, it's never going to change. And you can volunteer it could be your service or your OR. Take your staff out to lunch when they hit the turnover metrics you want to do, right? You can make an individual difference, whether you want it to be for yourself or your service line or your hospital. And if you're passionate about it, you'll get a lot in return from doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. This can take on many forms, and it doesn't have to be external. It can be internal within a small system. And, if there are people out there listening who have something that they've been mulling over, I can tell you unequivocally the hardest thing about starting was just doing something, doing anything to take a few steps forward. And if you're truly passionate about something, momentum builds. You don't even notice the rest.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And it speaks to the mindfulness concept of Dharma. And I don't know how familiar you are with this, David, but Dharma is where your skill set aligns with your passions, which you really love doing, but also aligns with kind of service and giving back and also being kind, right? And so when you find something like Well Prepped, or when you find something for me, kind of this movement in mindfulness and wellness in surgery, it aligns all of those things. And it just feels so good to do it on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
And for some
Absolutely.
people, listen, not for me, but for some people, it might be epic, right? We know those people who are so good at dot phrases and organizing. We know people who are really good at organizing calendars in the department. We know people who are really good at kind of organizing a residency or whatever it may be. Honor those people when they're good at the things that you're not, and take advantage of the things you're good at to make their lives better. And we all get better.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Um, that sense of community, at what point did you realize that Operate Was Zen was going to tie into that for you? Early
Yeah.
on or only after it got going?
No, I love hearing your story, and that's part of the reason I wanted to talk with you today. Is there's so many similarities in kind of the way our stories have lined up over the past couple of years, in addition to being neighbors when we grew up. But Operate Was Zen started for me, and you hear this in the early podcast. Is this was just a way for me to put my thoughts down. I wanted to put these thoughts together in a way that I could remember them, and it made sense for me. And if it helped anybody else out, awesome. And then very quickly, I kept getting feedback and more feedback that this really was helping people, and people really
Yeah.
enjoyed this, and just starting the conversation and saying it was okay to have the conversation. And the fact that the podcast even exists just kind of aligned with people's needs and wants, that we need to talk about these things and we need to move forward. And then the community has grown, and it's gotten tremendous feedback. I've met tremendous people doing this. And it's just been really affirming of what I was going through, other people were going through. And I'm sure a similar experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is you're bringing things out in the open that a lot of people are thinking that aren't discussed enough. The treachery of dealing with surgical complications, the emotional toll that we bring home from work that we try to compartmentalize. You start talking about it, and then it normalizes it, and then everyone tells you that they were thinking the same things. I think in this little arena with Well Prepped, as I mentioned, it's not perhaps thought to be appropriate to complain about the repetitive nature of your job. However, we do have to do that. I don't care if you're in cardiology or interventional radiology or gastroenterology or urology or internal medicine. We have to do this for 35 or 40 years. And just to make an analogy, think about completely other industries where repetitive explanations are required. In the software industry, Microsoft, Word and Excel and PowerPoint, they have support agents answering the same questions over and over again. Nobody tolerates that organically without creating some kind of knowledge base to share, right? But we're supposed to tolerate that without talking about it and without, getting upset about it. I don't think that's okay. And I do think that technology can mitigate repetitive tasks, and we haven't harnessed it nearly to the degree that we could.
Yeah. And to be perfectly honest, when you and I first talked about Well Prepped, I was skeptical.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, well, I think people kind of rely on us to have these conversations. That's why they're coming to see us. And after talking with you and then trying the program and sharing it with patients, I quickly came to realize they're coming to talk to you, but it doesn't have to be the spiel. The spiel can be automated, for lack of a better term, right? It can be
Right.
they can be prepared for that, so they can have a more in-depth conversation with you, which is so much more valuable in their eyes and our own.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, think of the patient interaction as a finite allotment of time, and depending on how busy you are and running behind, that can shrink. And there's a certain number of things that you have to get through. So if we clear the spiels out of there, you know, the basic fundamental table stakes knowledge about, I'm just going to use urology examples about vasectomy or kidney cysts or prostate cancer or erectile dysfunction. You leave all this space for, I mean, the idea is not to save time so that you can be sitting in your office on Twitter. The idea is that you leave space to breathe in the visit for all sorts of other things. Like I'm just starting to scratch the surface, I feel myself, but another well-prepped user told me a few weeks ago that at the very beginning of their visit, the patient said, I think I understand prostate cancer from your resources. I have some questions. And how often does the visit start with questions? For me, it used to be crammed into the last 5 minutes, and I would get annoyed when the list came out at the end, and that's really not fair. I mean, I've been a patient, my family members have been patients. They deserve to have those questions that they thought about and they wrote down answered. And they're actually great. I love answering those questions. Why? Because I can't predict what they're going to be. I mean, some of them I can predict, but you know, I love, you know, I'm not certainly going to speak for all doctors, but you touched on this before. We love interacting with patients, and we like when it's very specific and individual, because you feel like a human being interacting with another human being. That is a very special thing, not to be taken for granted ever. And the repetitive stuff doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you used the term before, disconnected. You feel disconnected from those patients when you're just being repetitive and doing your mindless spiel. And, you know, I've also got into coaching over the past few years, which is a total another story and another kind of passion side. But the coaching is a certain skill set, but the basic skill sets are to be present with that person, to be a good listener, and to create space. And that's what I love about Well Prepped and about this whole concept, David, of providing patients with the baseline information so that you can be more present with them. You can create space so that they can tell you what they're really scared about, what they're really nervous about. Because for one patient, it's going to be very different than what it is for the next patient. And it allows you to connect at an even deeper level and really address the things that they're truly concerned about.
Yeah. I mean, I like the way you say that, be present. You know what that reminds me of? And this is something I think a lot of listeners can identify with. When you're interviewing for medical school or you're interviewing for residency, and the question gets asked, why do you want to be a doctor? And then for residency, why do you want to be a urologist? And, you know, we all had an answer to that. And the first time we gave it, it was very genuine. And the 70th time we gave it, we had to somehow make it sound genuine because we'd said it 70 times. I mean, I'm just telling you how I felt. I mean, I've never talked about this before, but you know, it became like I dreaded being asked that question because I had to fake the original enthusiasm and organic presence that I didn't make up the answer. It was real, but it felt spoofed by the end because I'd heard myself give it 70 times. So when you had an interview where you couldn't predict the question you were asked and you had a real moment with the interviewer, that's when you really connect with people and they get to know who you are. Did you have an experience like that?
Yeah, you know, I've never thought of it that way too, but what a great example that is. First of all, for our trainees and students who are listening, right? And cue into being present when you give that answer, because it's pretty obvious when you're faking it, to be honest with you.
Right.
No matter how good you think you are, it gets obvious. And that's why we always ask too, how many interviews have you been on so far? Is this getting towards the end? Because we know to cut you a little bit of slack when it's not as genuine. But when you're giving that answer, try to give it a fresh spin, something different you've been thinking about to make it a little fresh. There's a little tip for that. But thinking as it from the other end, I hate asking that question, or I've come to hate asking that question. So I try and ask it in different ways. And sometimes they're goofy and sometimes they come off great. Sometimes they come off terrible. One I've been doing lately is, if you came to this residency and we gave you $10 million on day one to do anything you want in urology, what are you going to spend that $10 million on? And then you see people
Oh,
start,
I like that.
yeah, they start thinking,
Yeah.
oh, what am I really excited about urology? And what am I going to invest my money in? You can't buy a car, you can't buy a house, you can't pay off your debt. You got to do something in urology with that money. And so I try and ask those questions in different ways now. And I never thought of that, David, but it's a way to really connect with people, because you're trying to see how they think, because the answer. We all love urology because it's the greatest field in the world, right? And anybody who goes into any field goes into it because they think it's the greatest field in the world. So let's, try to connect with them at deeper levels and understand why and how they think.
But the fact that you don't like answering that question is because you don't want to put the applicant in that position of feeling like they're pressing play, right, on their answer. And we don't want, and to bring this back full circle back to the patient-doctor encounter, that is a sacred encounter, but it's different in 2022 than it was in 1910, right? I mean, we have to evolve. We want to make the visit such that there's a good chance that we're going to be fully present, and to let the patient be fully present. And, again, I don't want to overstate well prep, but it's one way. It's not the only way, but it's one way of streamlining a process to clear out the things that make us feel not present.
Yeah. Before well prepped, or before this, how do you create that presence? How do you create that interaction with people, or that atmosphere? What are ways you've thought about doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So every patient interaction, I try to talk about something completely not related to why they're there. What do you do for work? Where are you from? What do you like to do? I try to get into that. And some patients are a little disarmed by that initially. They're doubtful that you actually care. And they'll say something like a desk job, say, no, really, I want to know what do you do? And if I take notes, the sticky note in the chart function, I use sticky notes on every patient, and I write something in there. It's never related to urology. It's only related to something about them that I'll remember. And it's something unique about their profession or something about our discussion. And I don't know how many thousands of patients I've seen, but if I look at a sticky note, I can picture the person in my head, not their name necessarily, but so back to your question, I try to have that be the first significant portion of the conversation, because it establishes a rapport. I feel like I'm developing a sense of trust and a connection with the patient. And then it sort of becomes, all right, so do we have to talk about the urology thing that you're here? But that is not so much a tactic or anything. I really do enjoy learning about what people do in the world and what they're interested in. But again, it makes the job enjoyable. I think, again, it's that human contact that is the reason why I was drawn to this. And that part doesn't go away. There's certain things that are as true now as they ever were when I started. That one-on-one interaction in the exam room, when it's real. I mean, when you're not pressing play on some spiel in your head, and what happens in the operating room. For me, those things have not. A lot of other things have changed over the last 20 years, but those two things have not. Thank God.
Yeah. No, it's great. I do a very similar thing. I do the same thing. I ask about employment and occupation and where people are from. I tend to do it after the spiel. So I give the spiel. I'm like, hey, you're here for your kidney, your small renal mass. Here's what I can tell you about small renal masses. Here are your options. Tell me what you think. And hey, what do you do, by the way? And where are you from? And
Right.
I think it helps you remember that patient. It helps create a connection. I don't use the sticky notes. I will put it. I actually put it in my HPI, and now with
you put it in there.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know if you guys are fully open where patients can read all of their clinic notes and stuff.
Yep.
So it's changed the way I structure notes a little bit. Wonderful 75-year-old man or woman from so-and-so
Right.
whose daughter's owns the local bakery and is known for her rye bread. Sometimes I put that stuff right in the assessment plan or the HPI, so it cues me, but it also lets the patient know that I was paying attention to them. Like, this stuff's important, to me.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. And then the other thing I learned is from John Gerhardt, who is the great pediatric urologist at Hopkins, where I trained. And we see a lot of patients in follow-up, right? Sometimes it's really quick and easy. Your PSA is undetectable. I'm really happy for you, right? That's a 30-second conversation, but people still like to come in. And
Yeah.
you could leave it at 30 seconds, but that's really impersonal. And by having those prior notes and the prior connection, so tell me about your daughter's bakery. How's the bread shop
Yeah.
coming along, right? What's going on with the rye bread? And you spend more time having a conversation about them and their life, and it builds a great relationship. They tell their family and their friends and the people that they interact, I've got the greatest doctor wherever you may be, because they care about me. They want to know about me,
Yeah.
not just the tumor they took out or the surgery they did or whatever it may have been. And I think those things are a huge part to the human connection.
There's no question. And that sparked two thoughts for me. One is, when I go to the doctor, even though I know the doctor has taken notes, when they make some very personal comment, I appreciate it so much. Even though I know they've written it down, it doesn't matter. Even the act of writing it down shows that you care. It's not that you're pretending you've memorized it,
Yeah.
There's one other thing, and this is a stylistic thing, but if there's trainees out there who want to take this idea, it served me very well. Before I go down to see the patient in the pre-op area, I'll look at something in the note, and I'll go to those notes and I'll reference it somehow when I go and say hello. The patients are so nervous for this big operation, and they're sitting there, lined with, bed after bed and they feel like a number. And if you can say something like, how was the drive this morning from such and such? Was there a lot of traffic, or some reference to their occupation, and they're sitting there thinking, or I would be thinking, they remember me. This guy remembers me. I'm not just a number today having surgery. This matters to me. And, there's something, I don't want to get too metaphysical here, but there
Hey,
is
this is the
something about
podcast to get
patient's-
metaphysical. If you want
This
to
is
get
the podcast.
metaphysical,
I'm in
this
the
is
right
the time
place.
to
All right,
do
let's
it.
get
Yeah.
metaphysical. Let's do it. Yeah, this is the place. The patient's mindset as they go under anesthesia, I think, is really important. Everyone's nervous, but when there's a sense of trust and inner peace, I think that really, really matters. And these little things that we can do to make the person feel human on that day. One of the things I like to say is, the day is finally here. The big day is finally here. Because it's true for everyone, right? This is like the next work day for us, but it's a big day for the patient every single time.
For most patients, it's going to be one of the top 5 most memorable and important days of their life, right? This is up there with,
right,
especially for cancer surgery. This is up there with weddings and birth of children and things like that. It is up there the day they had a cancer operation.
Yeah. And, residents can tell you, and God, I feel like I should publicly apologize. I'm chronically running late. I'm like Mr. 5-10 minutes late, but I still show up and I try to, be present. If you put your hand on the patient's leg, touch their shoulder, and not as a show, but because you really mean it. I think a lot of why we struggle with being overburdened, or if it gets to an extreme and feeling burnt out, is where we don't have as many of those moments. When you pull the drape back and you don't recognize a patient, God forbid, like that you sat with in clinic, like that's a warning sign. I think we get to those moments because we I don't know, we somehow drift away from those real connections. But there are ways that we can bring that back, but we have to be very deliberate about it. It's not just going to happen. if somebody's listening to this and they're struggling with feeling disconnected from their professional job, it's not going to go away just because it just happens to go away. I think, and it's not going to take one tool either. It's going to take tackling it from all different directions. That's part of the reason why I really like these discussions, because there's not one solution that's going to fit all of us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it really is about being intentional, right? How do you want to interact? How do you want to feel at work? And if you're not feeling that way, do it. Figure out what you need to
Right.
do to feel that way. And you're right, those personal actions are incredibly important in that. It would be so easy. It's one of the easiest things to delegate away that would make our day better. If you think about just time management, is not doing consent, just walking into the operating room half an hour later when the patient's already asleep. But you
Right.
wouldn't want to be treated that way. You wouldn't want your family to be treated that way.
No.
And
No.
it robs you also of the interaction that brought you into being a surgeon and a doctor. And I do the same thing. I consent every single one of my patients by myself. Even though the residents offer all the time, it is my job, I think, to consent patients and talk to them before they go. And the other thing, I don't get to do this for everybody, but I love to tell them, right before anesthesia is getting started, hey, have a good nap, have a good sleep. We're going to take good care of you. We'll see you when you wake up. And that's a 3 to 5 second interaction. It makes a huge difference to me, and I think it makes a huge difference to patients, and it, I think, brings us a better connection.
If not for the Versed, I'm sure they would mention. I'm sure they would mention it later.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we've talked about some great things. I do want to talk a little bit more about Well Prepped, and I use it now. I've had great response from patients. It's helped me tremendously in clinic due to some logistical issues. For a long time, we were basically sending it out more or putting in after visit summaries after the fact rather than upfront. But the more you can get it upfront, the more it helps, I think, with patients, and kind of heightening the experience of your clinic appointment. But one of the things you and I have interacted over is it is so easy now through social media and other things to create content. You and I both
Yes.
made videos in the matter of 5 or 10 minutes. And when I started thinking about this and creating videos, it was, what videos do I want to create? I started thinking of, all right, what are the spiels? The spiels can go. I don't need to say the spiels in clinic if somebody's already seen them and understands them. So let me create videos around the spiels. And that's one of the beautiful things I loved about Well Prepped, is that if I thought this was a spiel and I felt myself being disconnected, that's the perfect content for a video or a pamphlet or whatever it may be that fits that kind of material. So tell us a little bit more about kind of your thoughts on Well Prepped and how we can use it. And then we can tell people how to get involved if they're interested.
All right. So I realized my initial description of what it is for people listening who really don't know what it is, I just want to give a slightly more detailed description of it. If you think about the top 15 conditions that you see in clinic, you can easily make a condition webpage, your own personal custom condition webpage, with whatever resources you want to put on that page. There's a video carousel that you can upload all of your handouts, and then anything on the internet with a link you can put on there, a link to a podcast, a link to a support group. One of the things I'm realizing is that I can give patients a more uniform experience, because all these things that I previously used to forget to tell them, I can put on the page and they're all seeing it. So that's the idea. But I have to tell you, Phil, I had this hypothesis a year ago when I was just working on this and nobody knew about it, that there were doctors out there who might have considered recording a video, maybe a little bit camera shy, but we're never going to do it if it was just this abstract thing like, I'm going to post a video on YouTube and maybe somebody will watch it. But my hypothesis was that if you gave doctors a very easy delivery tool, that people would start taking out their phones and recording videos. And I have to say, like, that's also another really exciting thing. This is to some degree coming to fruition with early adopters. There are doctors who, like you, within days of creating their Well Prep pages, record like dozens of videos. And it was just the thing they needed to, it's so fun to watch. It's almost like a relief, like, oh God, I've been waiting for something like this. Maybe I didn't know how to articulate it, but I would never sit in front of a video to record this, but now I'm going to. And I just want to talk about that aspect for a little bit, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are like, I would never sit in front of a video and talk. But you already do this speech or these many speeches in front of a stranger, the patient, day in and day out, and you don't get nervous about that anymore. So there's lots of ways to do it. I'm just going to name a few. Actually, right now I'm in the middle of making a video on how to make these videos. But the easiest way to do it is to just take your phone, prop it up in front of you at eye level, hit record, and talk with no pictures, nothing. I want to give a quick shout out to Scott Egner at University of Chicago, because he did this for a few conditions: prostate cancer, testicular cancer. It's like a 3 to 5 minute spiel. It must be a similar spiel to what he gives. It's low budget. It's low fidelity. There's no camera crew in there putting makeup on him. There's no lights. There's no fancy microphone. And it is fantastic because it's him. It's a human interaction recorded one time. So that's the easiest way to do it. Another way to do it is to slap together a PowerPoint presentation. I think a lot of us go on Google Images, or at least I do when I have the patient in the exam room and I need images. I go to Google Images, PCNL, kidney cancer, prostate biopsy, pull those, throw them into a PowerPoint, and then start a Zoom meeting. This sounds lonely, but start a Zoom meeting with just you in it, and then hit record, and then upload that to YouTube on an unlisted link, and then you have your video. You can get fancier. For doctors that are already tech savvy, they can probably imagine how they would do it when it's a little bit more involved, but I'll leave it at that. It's easy to do. It's like ripping a Band-Aid off. And if you think about the fact that you've already done it hundreds of times, it's just one more time recorded, and you're helping your future self. That's and a lot of patience, by the way. I don't know if you have this phenomenon. I'm sure you do, but for any spiel I give, let's take robotic prostatectomy. There's a 20-minute version, which is the best version. There's a 10-minute version when I'm pretty rushed, which is okay. It misses a few things, but it's pretty good. There's a 5-minute version, which is kind of bare bones, and there's a 2-minute version, which really nobody deserves to get. So why don't we reframe this whole thing and say, everybody deserves to get your best explanation. And now we have ways to do that really easily. I mean, every patient deserves, for these foundational things that I'm trying to imagine specialties that are not our own. Maybe it's bloating or, hemorrhoids or, different types of diets and GI. I'm sure they explain those ad nauseum, pun intended, but there's better ways for us to do it for our own sanity and for the patient's benefit.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I'll give two quick stories. One is, on my page, I created a meet the team page, and I actually made short videos with my administrative assistant, the PAs who work with me, my nurse who works with me, so patients could see who they are before they come in. And I'll tell you, they are not as comfortable as some of us talking on video. But the way we did it was I just held the phone up in front of them, and I had a conversation with them. I asked them questions. So tell me your name. Where are you from? What do you, how are patients going to see you? Where are patients going to see you? What are the kinds of questions they're going to ask you? And then all I did was a simple Windows editor. You edit out the questions, and it's basically them talking over it. And so that's a way to do it too, is you can either have a conversation with somebody, ask them to ask you questions if you're not so tech savvy or you're a little nervous, and then it is having a conversation. You're basically just recording yourself having a conversation. So I'd give that piece of advice. And then the other one is I won't embarrass the marketing department at the prestigious university that I worked at or used to work at or continue to work at, but I showed it to some of the marketing people and they said, there's no way we could do this. I mean, if you think about what it would take for a school of medicine or hospital budget and timeline and logistics to make videos and turn them over in a quick time and get them uploaded in the same day to a webpage, they can never do it in any reasonable budget. And you've now made this incredibly accessible and doable, which I think is the huge hurdle for a lot of us.
You know, there's a few things about what you said that are just super exciting for me to hear. One is that meet the team idea. I would never have thought of that. The things that people are coming up with, given this fairly permissive delivery mechanism, people are coming up with things that I just had never conceived of. And the other thing is, you know, when you said the marketing team, I pictured sort of like the traditional video shoot that some of us have been involved in. Doctors don't have to wait for that anymore. Like I feel like now it's possible for people to just bust out their phones, which are really pretty good movie studios in their own right now, and just do it themselves. You know, they can record a video themselves so that patients can meet them. Not every doctor has a meet the doctor video. People can do it themselves. People can record their spiels on their own. The most satisfying thing about this for me is that I think there's an appetite amongst doctors now to help themselves. A feeling of being tired of waiting for someone else to help. And that is, I mean, it feels so good to see doctors react in the way you did and the meet the team idea. And there's a lot of other very creative ways that people are using this, and people are like, oh my God. People who've never stood in front of the video camera before are like, now's the time.
Yeah.
I don't want to explain cardiac ablation again.
No, and I think it also, I mean, the other thing it does is it gives us a unique ability to interact with our patients. I'm waiting for a holiday or a late night when I'm on call and I'm stuck here and the hospital's kind of empty. I'm going to bring my phone to the pre-op area and the PACU and say, hey, listen, this is what a typical pre-op bay looks like. I'm going to come, you're going to see me. We're going to go over your surgical consent. We may sign a blood transfusion consent form. The nurse is going to come in, put your IV. She's going to ask you a bunch of questions. The anesthesiologist is going to come in and ask you the same questions again. And this is what the morning is going to look like. And then video number 2, hey, here's the recovery room. You're going to be sitting here. You're going to be pretty sleepy. You may or may not have some discomfort. These are the things we want to work on with you. And then lastly, hey, here's a typical room in our hospital. This is what it may look like when you recover, you know, when you're recovering in the hospital. And same kind of thing. I think that gives comfort to patients. There's so much anxiety that comes with uncertainty. Right. And if we can give them a little bit of certainty, a little bit of knowledge about what they're going to undergo, I think it could have tremendous benefits for them and us.
Yeah. I mean, as you're explaining that, I'm imagining myself as a patient. I have reached the age of requiring a colonoscopy. So just to use that as an example, even though I know basically what to expect, I have anxiety about that coming up. And, you know, as you're describing this, watching a few short videos like that would decrease my anxiety. I know what it's going to look like. I know what the room's going to look like. I know who's going to be talking to me. I'm less nervous if I'm a patient, you know, and the other thing is, you know, it doesn't have to be for everyone. Some patients aren't going to resonate with this, but for the ones that will, how can we not offer this kind of thing? I know we've been focusing a lot in this discussion on how we can help the doctor side of the equation, but boy, I mean, if you've been using these resources with your own patients, I'm sure you've heard at least a few thank yous from them.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the patients are, they're going to Google, which I don't blame them. I would do it too. It's incredibly intimidating. And there's a lot of anxiety there. I'm not just reading something, but is it reliable? So to be handed doctor vetted materials is, another source of anxiety relief.
Yeah. And not
And
even
they
doctor
deserve,
vetted,
and
doctor created.
doctor created. They deserve that. They deserve that. Um, and the last thing that sparked what you said is, when if there are people out there who have an idea of anything they may be passionate about that they want to pursue, there were people early on who said this was a very stupid idea, and that people could just put it on the website, that hospital websites could just take care of it. And just hearing you say the marketing department's reaction to this, is I don't want to say satisfying, but I had an inkling that was not going to be possible. I mean, if you want them to change your profile photo on your doctor profile, even just doing that, good luck, right?
Right. Get the photo shoot, get the IT people to change it. I mean, it takes an act of Congress,
Right. Right.
to get one of these things, and they recognize that too. And yeah, the production value may be better if you're in a studio and the lighting's right and you've got a professional videographer and editor and all that stuff. But you're basically it's about the information, not the production. Right? And it's about
and
the
I really
communication.
think looking at the videos that you've done and others, that patients don't care. And there's a flip side to this, that people can use this without recording their own videos. They can use other people's content. I have your kidney cyst video on my kidney cyst page, and that also doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, I've got your prostate cancer stuff all over mine. I mean, I could say the same thing, but it would be me saying the same thing you just said. So
Yeah.
listen,
Right.
We're friends. We're not in competition.
Right.
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 Let people see what my smart friend, David has to say. So.
Right. And there's just to tease one thing briefly. This is an exciting beginning for Well Prepped, but just imagine if there's enough users where we can crowdsource the best resources for each other. I mean, that's where my mind is going with this, and I know that is achievable. I think patient education materials is it's time for it to be released from the dusty file cabinet and the plexiglass rack of brochures that doctors have. We need to move beyond that.
Yeah. Well, David, it's been a tremendous conversation. Tell people if other surgeons, other physicians out there are interested in Well Prepped, is there a way, what's the best way to kind of seek this out now?
So the best way is to go to wellprept.com, WELLPREPT.com. And as of this recording, there's a way to sign up on the wait list, and then I'll get in touch with you. Further on down there, when it's officially launched, there won't be a wait list, and people can just get started. But people can also feel free to direct message me on Twitter. It's just @Canes David, CANES David.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I put
best ways.
Yeah, I'll make sure I put both of those in the notes so that people can access them when they're looking at the podcast. Tremendous conversation. We've talked about a lot of things. There's a lot of things we didn't get to talk about that we had potentially planned on talking to. Is there anything kind of pressing you want to talk about tonight, David? Kind of before we wrap up here.
There's two thoughts that I just want to share. One from the idea of being primed to solve problems. I think there's a fair chance that there's some listener out there who has what they think is an idea that they are uncertain whether they're going to pursue. I just want to encourage them to just take the first step and get started. You gotta just, if the idea won't leave you alone, bad ideas kind of come and then they leave. If the idea won't leave you alone, it's worth pursuing, and you should just go for it. The second thing I wanted to say, as you were talking about the importance of having passions and passion projects in addition to your primary specialty, I just want to say something to the residents listening. It's very important not to put passions on hold during training. And there's a very strong tendency to do so, almost an expectation, because training can be so all encompassing. But there's always a way. If you like music, I love music, and I remember being on night float, and there was a piano in the lobby, and it was 3 a.m, and there was no one in the hospital, and I printed out some sheet music, and I went and I played piano by myself at 3 a.m, and it was a way of saying, I'm not going to let this take away these pieces of who I am, and I think it takes a lot more effort during training to do that, because you're not in control over your schedule, you're not in control over your life. It's hard to even go to the dentist when you're in training. But we're talking about how important it is to have passions, and there's this 5 to 7 year stretch in your life where that should be part of the equation. It's not like when I become an attending, then I'll have passions. It's got to be now.
It's an incredible message. And really, it's become a theme of this season of the podcast is we are humans and we are doctors, or we're humans and we are surgeons, right? They are interrelated. They are who we are, and they are not separate from each other. They are intertwined, and all of the things in and out of the operating room.
And each one makes the other half better, yeah. Right?
It does. Right. They bring strength to who we are. And I think it's an incredible message for people to hear. So David, I want to thank you again. It's been an incredible hour conversation here. I wrote down some things that I think are really important for people to kind of to take home. We initially started talking about passion projects and feeling disconnected at work, and passion and bringing passion into what you do is a real way to reconnect with who you are, with what you're doing, and with your patients, specifically as surgeons and physicians. We talked a fair amount of some mindfulness concept. We talked about Dharma. We talked about being present. We talked about creating space with people. And we talked about how do we avoid just pressing play in what we're doing and bringing passion to what we do on a regular basis, whether it's talking with our patients, whether it's the operating room, whether it's our clinic, whether it's our clinic consultations. And we talked about your amazing project, Well Prepped, and how that is creating a space for us to do that, to be more present, to be more mindful, to be with our patients, and to be better doctors and better human beings. And I love what you said. You said everybody deserves our best 20 minutes, right? Our best 20-minute spiel. And we can't give that to everybody every day, just logistically, but using technology, using this project gives us the ability to make sure we kind of level the playing field and give everybody our best spiel, our best talk, our best information about who we are and what we do. And then lastly, to everybody out there who's thinking about how to bring more meaning to their passions, you said, be primed to solve problems. You said it 3 different ways, and I wrote them all down. Be primed to solve problems. You said, keep your eyes open. And you said, if the idea won't leave you alone, it's a good idea. And the second part of that was just get started, do something, take that first step. It doesn't need to be a leap. Take the first step and start moving in that direction. And you'll learn something with that first little step, and it may turn into a second step or a third step. Eventually you may get to a leap, but little steps in the beginning will move you in the right direction. I think great advice for our listeners out there.
Thanks, Phil. You summarized that so well. I had so much fun talking. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, I look forward to doing it again, whether it's on the podcast or over a beer or a cocktail at one of our next meetings.
Absolutely.
All right, David, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. I know people are really going to benefit from this conversation.
Thanks, Phil.